Hello and welcome to a special edition of the State of the Fleet Industry video series produced by Automotive Fleet Magazine, which puts a spotlight on key industry leaders in today's fleet management industry. And today I have the honor to interview David Friedlen, Senior Manager, Reimbursement Business Development for Wheels, Inc. And David will talk with us today about how the COVID-19 pandemic is changing the industry's perception towards driver reimbursement. So thank you for joining us, David.
Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. So let's start off our discussion, starting off with your job responsibilities. And I'd like to start our conversation exploring what you see as the latest trends in driver reimbursement among commercial fleet operations. And as I mentioned earlier, what impact is the COVID pandemic having in changing our perceptions towards driver reimbursement?
That's a great question. I think the pandemic has impacted reimbursement in a couple of different ways. First and foremost is just the restriction on travel in general. Companies are looking at their employees working from home and looking at underutilized assets that are sitting in people's driveways. So that always tends to prompt a review by executive management. Secondly, is the financial impact that COVID has had on companies in general. Certainly, companies have found that their sales have gone down. Some companies are dealing with having to furlough or lay off employees. And as a result of that, before they make those moves, they like to look at all different programs and see if there's other places they can cut costs. And fleet is no exception to that.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, and perhaps more interesting, is the general philosophy that companies are taking now relative to travel in general as they get more comfortable with people working at home and teleconferencing. So it'll be interesting to see once COVID is behind us and the pandemic is behind us, whether or not companies have their employees still travel at the same rate that they were prior to the outbreak of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's going on in our industry, among all these other things, is really a generational shift as to who is participating in the fleet management industry. And with this changing in employee demographics, do you find that there is a greater receptivity now towards driver reimbursement as an option in lieu of getting a company vehicle for certain segments of employees?
Yeah, certainly we do see that. And what we find is in today's environment, a lot of employees are looking to match their lifestyle choices with their vehicle. And so some people may want to drive an electric vehicle, or they may want to have a SUV or a truck to pull a boat. And those vehicles may not be provided on the selector list by their company. So they may try to opt in for a reimbursement plan so they can take those funds and use them for a vehicle of their choice. There's also people out there who have always had the mindset that they would prefer to own their own asset relative to a vehicle. So they look at that vehicle as something that they want to acquire, that once it's paid off, they can sell it, they can give it to their kids. They have some options there as well. Conversely, though, there's employees out there, especially new people to the workforce, that may not have the resources to go out and acquire their own vehicle or the credit status yet. So the company car to them is a wonderful benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I would say we're seeing a real trend in our business, which is for companies to be able to offer a choice program, allowing individuals to choose whether or not they want to have a reimbursement program or a company provided vehicle. And that gives the company a real advantage as well, because it offers the best of both worlds. They can recruit and retain top talent by making sure that they're offering up programs that meet people's lifestyle choices as well as their business requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something we see as a real strong trend in our industry.
Now, looking at the industry in general, are there certain industry segments that are more predisposed towards offering driver reimbursement as an employee option? I know tech industries traditionally offered reimbursement, as have some of the larger retail business chains. And why is that?
Well, I'll take retail first. Retail has been struggling long before the pandemic, with the likes of Amazon changing the whole way people purchase today. So what we'll see is companies that maybe are looking for some financial flexibility there. In the retail world, their business has been volatile of late, so that makes sense for them.
Mhm.
Likewise, with tech companies, they often spend a lot of time investing in R&D. It takes a long time for some of those products to make it to the market, and they may not be comfortable investing and committing to owned vehicles or leased vehicles until they feel that their products are more established in the marketplace and they have a little more comfort with that their ability is going to be long-term within that industry.
Well, what about companies that have a certain sense of seasonality in their business patterns, or
Mhm.
companies that are project-based, where employment goes up and down? Is that an area that lends itself towards employee reimbursement?
Well, it is at least a segment of that for sure. When you're dealing with companies that have seasonality or need to staff up and staff down throughout the year, it may make sense to keep some of those employees on a reimbursement program because they're never sure exactly how many employees they're going to have, in-house at any one point in time.
Hmm.
So those are kinds of industries that do make sense.
So, based on all of your conversations with people in the industry, what do you foresee as being the future trends in driver reimbursement? How is it evolving as a business option?
Well, as I mentioned, I think one of the strong trends is for companies to be able to offer choice programs. If you look at surveys of young people today in particular, they're looking for flexibility, and even ahead of total income, they're looking for things like flexible working hours and benefits as being very high priorities for them. So the ability for them to choose the vehicle of their choice and have options relative to a company car versus their own vehicle, I think are attractive to them.
Hmm.
And so I think that's going to continue to be a strong trend.
Yeah, and reimbursement's been around for a long time. I think in earlier conversations we had, it goes back to the 1930s is when it first
Sure.
originated. But fleet managers have always perceived as reimbursement option as being somewhat competitive to the company provided vehicle. And is that true? Is reimbursement a threat to company provided vehicles?
No, I don't think it is. I think there will always be a place for the company car, a strong place for company provided vehicles. I think many people can relate to the idea of being offered a position that includes a company vehicle and how good that feels, and how much they're relieved that the company is providing them either the tool they need to do their business or a vehicle that they don't have to worry about maintaining and insuring and taking care of. So that's a wonderful perk for them. We do see companies who will look at choice programs, and I think those can stand side by side with company provided vehicles very nicely. So I
Very
think in
good.
the long term, we're definitely going to see the company car not going anywhere. And in fact, one of the things that I'm already starting to sense is as we're getting, we hope, closer to the end of the pandemic here, companies are just very anxious to have their employees be able to get out and visit with their customers and visit with prospects and get face to face with people again. And I think once we see that economy opening up again, we're going to find that the company car is going to be right back where it was prior to the pandemic.
Terrific. Well, we've reached our allotted time. I want to thank you, David, for a great conversation,
Thank
and
you.
also thank you for being available to talk with us today.
My pleasure.